Why does British food have such a bad reputation? From beans on toast to black pudding, British cuisine often finds itself the subject of ridicule. But is there any truth behind the jokes, or has British food just been misunderstood? Today, we're diving deep into the history of British cuisine, exploring its evolution, the cultural influences that shaped it, and why, despite everything, it's not as bad as many think. British food often takes a beating in popular culture, from comedic jabs at beans on toast to references to bland, uninspiring meals. But is that really the full story? We all know about the much-mocked full English breakfast, the controversial black pudding, and the divisive jellied eels, but these dishes are just a small part of a much larger, more complex history. British cuisine has evolved dramatically over time, influenced by invasions, colonialism, and global trade. So, let's take a closer look at why British food has earned its reputation and how, over time, it's managed to fight back against the stereotypes. 1. Early history, simple beginnings. Long before the Romans arrived, food in Britain was about survival. Early Brits weren't concerned with haute cuisine, they were concerned with eating enough to survive the harsh winters. Grains, wild vegetables, and the occasional hunted animal made up their diet. Think hearty, earthy stews, sometimes flavored with wild herbs like thyme and mint. Barley was being used to brew ale, probably one of the first attempts to make drinking a bit safer since water wasn't always an option. Then came the Romans. The Romans didn't just bring their legions to Britain, they brought culinary sophistication. New spices, fruits like grapes and cherries, and fresh vegetables arrived. Roman influence also meant an expansion of flavor profiles in Britain. They brought with them the art of seasoning and preserving, think pickled and fermented foods, along with an introduction to dishes like black pudding. While blood sausage might sound unappetizing, it was a way to use every part of the animal and make the most out of what they had. Black pudding remains a controversial yet beloved British dish to this day. 2. Viking and Norman influences, a taste of the foreign. As the centuries passed, the Vikings made their way to Britain. Known for their ferocity in battle, the Vikings also had a rich food culture. They were particularly skilled at smoking fish, a technique that remained integral to British cuisine. Smoked fish dishes like kippers became staples in coastal regions, and that technique of preserving food through smoking continues to shape British culinary traditions. But it didn't stop there. In 1066, the Normans changed the culinary landscape of Britain forever. These French-speaking conquerors introduced refined dishes to the British diet, including richer meats, pastries, and pies. Their love of food was apparent in the lavish feasts they hosted. This is when the British began to see the rise of fancy meats, gravies, and more intricate food preparations that were initially reserved for royalty. The introduction of pork pies, flavored with herbs and fruits, became a particular favorite among the elite, and soon enough, they became ingrained in British culture as comfort food. 3. The Tudor era, spices and the New World. By the Tudor period, British cuisine was starting to see more variety. With the discovery of the New World came the arrival of new ingredients, potatoes, tomatoes, and turkeys, each of which would change British eating habits for centuries to come. Sugar and spices also began flowing into Britain, turning up at the tables of the wealthy. The Tudors were the first to really experiment with these new flavors. Suddenly, food wasn't just about sustenance, it was about indulgence, decoration, and creating exciting combinations of flavors. The ploughman's lunch, with its combination of bread, cheese, and pickles, is a product of this era. While simple, it's still a quintessential British dish that represents the heart of British cuisine, rustic, hearty, and built for working folk. The Tudors also brought us the influence of sweet desserts like trifle, along with the use of spices like cinnamon and cloves in savory dishes, a trend that would continue to influence British cooking. 4. The Victorian era, industrialization and the rise of convenience. The Victorian era, which spanned from the early 19th century, brought about massive changes in Britain. The Industrial Revolution meant that food production became more efficient, leading to greater access to ingredients. Railways helped move produce and meats across the country, and this newfound transportation network made it easier to enjoy dishes like Scottish salmon and Cornish cream all over the UK. But the Industrial Revolution also led to the rise of convenience foods. Canning technology, which was developed during this period, allowed the British to enjoy preserved foods like baked beans and corned beef in ways that weren't possible before. While this was a game changer in terms of convenience, it also led to a perception of British food as dull and overly reliant on mass production. However, the Victorian era wasn't all about convenience. It was also a time of opulent dining for the upper classes. Dishes like beef Wellington and Victorian-style puddings were seen as the height of culinary sophistication. The contrast between the working-class staples and the decadent meals of the rich set the stage for the wide variety of food that would later define British cuisine. 5. World War era. Rationing and the rise of comfort food. World War I and World War II drastically affected British food culture. With food rationing in place, British citizens had to make do with less. Canned goods became essential. And while this made life easier, it didn't exactly add excitement to the dining table. Dishes like mock banana, made from mashed parsnips, and other rationing-era recipes were born out of necessity rather than choice. The food was plain, practical, and unremarkable. But amidst the scarcity, some British dishes began to emerge as comfort food. Shepherd's pie, made with leftover meat and mashed potatoes, became a staple. As did the Sunday roast, a dish rooted in both practicality and tradition. Even though the British were living through some of the most challenging times in modern history, these comforting meals became part of the fabric of British life, offering solace amid hardship. 6. Post-war and the convenience revolution. The post-war era brought its own set of challenges and changes to British cuisine. By the 1950s and 60s, convenience foods were becoming the norm. Ready-made meals, frozen dinners, and pre-packaged foods were a time-saver for busy families. Fish fingers, a dish that remains a staple of British households, became synonymous with easy meals for children. But this convenience came at a cost. The British developed a reputation for eating food that was overly processed and fried in heavy oils. The classic dishes that defined Britain, bangers and mash, fish and chips, toad in the hole, were comfort foods. But they were often made from cheaper ingredients and were heavy on fats, leading to criticism of British food being unhealthy and unimaginative. 7. The immigrant influence, the spice revolution. Post-World War II, immigration to Britain from India, Pakistan, and the Caribbean brought with it an influx of new spices and cooking techniques. Curry, once considered an exotic dish, quickly became a British staple. And chicken tikka masala, an adaptation of traditional Indian curry, became so popular that it was deemed the UK's national dish in the 2000s. This wave of immigrant influence completely transformed British food, bringing new flavors to the forefront. British cuisine began to diversify, embracing spices like cumin, coriander, turmeric, and garam masala. Not only did this change the taste of British food, but it also reshaped the very identity of British cuisine. Now, a night out for many Brits means enjoying an Indian curry, further solidifying the country's love affair with spice and flavor. 8. Modern British cuisine, a new era. Today, British cuisine is experiencing a renaissance. Gone are the days of bland, base meals. With celebrity chefs like Gordon Ramsay, Jamie Oliver, and Nigella Lawson championing local ingredients and innovative cooking techniques, British cuisine is being redefined. No longer seen as boring or bland, British cuisine is now celebrated for its diversity, creativity, and use of fresh, local ingredients. Gastropubs, which began in the late 20th century, have elevated traditional British comfort food to new heights. Dishes like bangers and mash, shepherd's pie, and fish and chips are now being reimagined with fine dining techniques and high-quality ingredients. Michelin-starred restaurants across Britain are proving that British food is more than just meat and potatoes, it's a blend of history, culture, and innovation. So, why does British food still have such a bad reputation? The truth is, the bad press stems from a combination of factors: historical food scarcity, a reliance on convenience, and a focus on practicality over creativity for much of the 20th century. But British food has come a long way. Today, it stands as a vibrant, evolving cuisine that blends tradition with global influences. From the humble ploughman's lunch to the bold flavors of chicken tikka masala, British food has reclaimed its place as one of the world's most diverse and exciting culinary traditions. What's your take on British food? Do you have a favorite British dish? Or are you still skeptical? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into British cuisine, don't forget to like and subscribe for more food history and culinary adventures. I'll see you next time.